Imagine waking up one morning to find your Ferrari gone. No broken glass, no alarm, just vanished. Now imagine this happening to hundreds of luxury car owners across New York City. In 1999, that nightmare became reality as the largest luxury car theft operation in American history unfolded on the streets of the Big Apple. The mastermind? Not your typical car thief, but a former Chinese intelligence officer who managed to steal thousands of high-end vehicles worth $75 million, and for years the police couldn't stop him. This is the story of Min Jin Yang, the spy who traded espionage for Grand Theft Auto on an unprecedented scale. How did he pull it off? And what million-dollar mistake finally brought him down? Let's dive in. New York City, 1999. The city that never sleeps was experiencing an economic boom. Wall Street was riding high, and the streets were lined with more luxury cars than ever before. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, high-end BMWs and Mercedes, you name it, New York had it. But something strange was happening. These expensive cars were disappearing at an alarming rate. In just 45 days, 48 luxury vehicles vanished without a trace. Now, car theft wasn't new to New York, but this was different. Usually when cars are stolen, they're found stripped for parts or abandoned somewhere. But these cars, they disappeared completely. No traces, no parts, nothing. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air, leaving the NYPD completely baffled. Enter Min Jin Yang. But who was he? And how did a Chinese spy end up stealing cars in New York? Yang's story begins in China. A former intelligence officer in the Chinese army, he was discharged in 1990. With his military career behind him, Yang moved to Shanghai, a wealthy city where there was a high demand for luxury cars. But here's the thing, such cars were incredibly expensive in China, often selling for twice their US price due to import taxes and demand. Yang saw an opportunity. He contacted local gangs in Shanghai and offered them a deal they couldn't refuse. He would supply them with luxury cars from America, and they would finance his operation. The math was simple. A car worth $100,000 in the US could sell for $200,000 in China. It was a goldmine waiting to be tapped. With $500,000 from his new partners, Yang set his sights on New York City. It was the perfect target. A huge concentration of luxury cars, busy streets where a high-end vehicle wouldn't stand out, and a constant flow of shipments leaving its ports. But Yang wasn't going to be just another car thief. He was going to run his operation like a spy mission. From the moment he landed in New York, he put his intelligence training to work. He entered the country using a fake identity, calling himself Kenny. He drove an old Nissan Altima and lived modestly, playing the role of a struggling immigrant perfectly. No one would suspect this unassuming man was about to become the mastermind behind a multi-million-dollar car theft ring. Yang's first task was to secure a warehouse, but not just any warehouse. It needed to be far from police stations, in a quiet area with little crime, a clean, unsuspicious neighborhood. After weeks of careful scouting, Yang found the perfect spot. To rent it, he created an anonymous company, adding another layer of protection to his operation. Next, he needed a crew. Yang recruited only trusted Chinese individuals, surrounding himself with people he could control and whose loyalty he could ensure. The warehouse was set up to look like a food storage facility from the outside, with surveillance cameras covering every angle of the surrounding streets. But Yang had no experience in actually stealing cars, and he didn't want to get his hands dirty. So he went looking for someone who did. At car auctions and garages across the city, he finally found his man, Dean, an experienced car thief. Yang offered Dean a deal. He would handle all the stealing, either alone or with a crew of his choosing, and Yang would take care of the rest. Dean brought in his friend Mario Lopez, an expert in bypassing car security systems. Together, they formed the core of Yang's theft operation. But here's the clever part. Yang kept himself separated from the actual thefts. He would deal only with Dean, who would deal with Mario and the other thieves. Yang was insulating himself, staying hidden in the shadows. Now let's break down how they actually stole the cars, because this is where it gets really interesting. Mario's skills were at the heart of the operation. He could steal any car, anywhere, anytime. When a target was identified, say, a Ferrari parked outside a luxury hotel, Mario would approach the car calmly, as if he owned it. He'd break the window instead of the lock, because a broken lock would trigger the car's security system. Once inside, Mario would connect a laptop to the car's computer system. In less than a minute, he could reprogram the security, allowing the car to start with a regular key. It was quick, quiet, and incredibly effective. But Yang's spycraft didn't stop there. He knew luxury cars often had GPS tracking systems, so after a car was stolen, it wasn't taken directly to the warehouse. Instead, it was driven to a neighborhood full of other expensive cars and left there for 2 days. If the police were tracking it, they'd find it there, among other similar vehicles. If 2 days passed without the car being recovered, they knew it was safe to move. Only then would the car be driven to a spot near, but not too near, the warehouse. Yang's team would perform counter-surveillance, driving in circles to spot any tails. They used lookouts and security cameras to ensure no one was following. Only when they were absolutely certain it was safe would the car finally be brought into the warehouse. Inside, Yang's Chinese crew would get to work. They'd repair any damage, create new keys, and reprogram the car's computer. When they were done, the vehicle looked brand new, as if it had just rolled off the showroom floor. But the real genius was in the shipping. Yang knew the police would be watching the ports, especially as the number of stolen cars increased. So he came up with an incredibly complex shipping route. First, the cars were loaded into shipping containers, hidden behind boxes of food. The containers were then trucked to New Jersey and loaded onto trains. These trains would cross the entire country, finally reaching California on the West Coast. From there, the containers were loaded onto ships, but not ships headed to China. No, these ships would set off in a completely different direction. Mid-journey, out in the vast Pacific Ocean, the containers would be secretly transferred to other vessels. Only these ships were bound for China. It was an incredibly complex and expensive process, but it made the cars almost impossible to track. This operation ran like clockwork for 5 years. Yang and his gang managed to steal thousands of cars, making millions of dollars. The police were puzzled. They couldn't catch them or find any evidence. The cars seemed to vanish into thin air, but even the most careful criminals make mistakes. And for Yang, that mistake came from getting greedy. As demand for luxury cars in China increased, Yang pushed his operation to steal more and more. They began targeting car dealerships, where they could steal multiple high-end vehicles in one hit. One night, Mario went to a dealership posing as a customer interested in a test drive. While chatting with the salesman, he noted where they kept the car keys, in a box in the manager's office. A few nights later, Mario returned. He broke in, went straight for the key box, and called in his crew. In just 3 minutes, they drove off with 7 luxury cars. It was their biggest haul yet, but it was also the beginning of the end. One of those 7 cars had something the others didn't, a new state-of-the-art GPS tracker that even Mario's tech couldn't detect. As the gang celebrated their biggest score, they had no idea that this single car was about to unravel their entire operation. The police, who had been frustrated for years by these vanishing vehicles, finally had a solid lead. They tracked the car to a parking lot, one of Yang's safe spots. But instead of moving in immediately, they decided to watch and wait. Their patience paid off. After 2 days, someone came to move the car. The police followed, careful to keep their distance. The car led them on a winding path through the city, eventually stopping a few blocks from an unassuming warehouse in a quiet neighborhood. The investigators set up surveillance on the warehouse. They watched day and night, slowly piecing together the operation. They saw trucks coming and going, always at odd hours. They noted the same faces appearing over and over, but they never saw Yang. He was too careful, too well hidden. As the police built their case, Yang's operation continued to hum along. He had no idea he was under surveillance. In fact, he was planning his biggest shipment yet, a container packed with 15 high-end cars, worth over $3 million. The day of the shipment arrived. The police watched as the container was loaded and sealed. They followed as it was driven to the port. And just as it was about to be loaded onto a ship, they made their move. The raid was swift and decisive. Agents swarmed the port, the warehouse, and a dozen other locations simultaneously. They caught everyone, the drivers, the mechanics, the lookouts. but Yang was nowhere to be found. It turned out Yang had been tipped off just hours before the raid. He had fled his home, leaving everything behind. For a moment, it seemed like he might escape justice. But Yang had made one final mistake. In his haste to flee, he had used his real passport instead of one of his many fakes. As he tried to board a flight to China at JFK Airport, his name flagged in the system. Within minutes, he was in handcuffs. The scale of Yang's operation stunned even veteran investigators. In the warehouse, they found 25 stolen luxury cars ready for shipment. They uncovered detailed logs showing thousands of cars stolen over 5 years. The total value? A staggering $75 million in today's money. But the money itself was nowhere to be found. Yang had been careful to keep his profits out of reach, hidden away in accounts in China. To this day, none of it has been recovered. In the end, Yang pleaded guilty to enterprise corruption. Despite the massive scale of his crimes, he was sentenced to only 10 years in prison. Some felt the sentence was too light for the magnitude of the theft. Others argued that his non-violent methods and the fact that he targeted only wealthy victims warranted leniency. Regardless, the impact of Yang's operation was felt far beyond the courtroom. It changed how luxury cars are protected, forcing manufacturers to develop more sophisticated anti-theft systems. It altered how police investigate organized car theft, showing them they needed to think bigger and look for international connections. The story of Min Jin Yang serves as a reminder that in the world of crime, sometimes the biggest threats come from the most unexpected places. A Chinese spy turned car thief managed to outsmart everyone for years, building an empire out of stolen luxury cars. In the end, it wasn't brilliant detective work or a high-tech security system that brought him down. It was simple human error, a single mistake after years of meticulous planning. It just goes to show that even the most carefully orchestrated criminal enterprises can unravel in an instant. As for Yang himself, he was released in 2015 after serving his sentence. His current whereabouts are unknown. Some speculate he returned to China, possibly still sitting on millions in hidden wealth. Others believe he may have started a new life somewhere else, under yet another false identity. As we close this incredible tale, it's worth pondering. In today's high-tech world, could a scheme like Yang still succeed? Or are the days of the master thief truly behind us? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure. As long as there are valuable things to be stolen, there will always be those clever and daring enough to try.